The Chinese language uses a writing system that represents the phonetic sounds that are made by a speaker of that language. Each character represents a syllable, and combinations of those characters form words and ultimately sentences. To draw complex Chinese characters requires more skill than drawing alphabetic characters because they contain a greater number of strokes. It is estimated that there are about 50,000 Chinese characters, but 3,000 of these are in common use. Some characters are pictographic and graphically represent the object, whereas others represent concepts. More recent characters combine meaning and components that specify the phonetic element of that character.
Chinese characters have changed over time, much like the Western alphabet. Western lowercase letters have evolved from the initial set of capital letters that the Romans adapted from the Greek alphabet. Prior to the printing press, books were copied by hand exactly the way that they were seen, and idiosyncrasies crept into the design after several generations of copying. Chinese invented the printing press before Europeans, and this saved the effort of writing the many strokes of their characters. Printer's type approximates a model that is commonly understood by all who could read Chinese characters, and can be taken as the standard to reconstruct with handwriting, known as an exemplar set of characters. A block of wood is carved with the impression of the character. This impression must be mirror reversed or it will not mark the paper correctly. Leonardo da Vinci famously wrote in mirrored handwriting, which would have been easier for a left-handed person as he was to achieve. It is interesting to speculate as to whether reversed Chinese characters are more difficult for a fluent reader to read than our alphabetic system of writing. Each of the Chinese characters may be written within a square-shaped area such that they are all the same size. Elements called radicals are repeated in many of the different characters. Radicals were developed to allow characters to be classified within dictionaries and to simplify the characters by reducing the number of strokes required. Once radicals are mastered, they may have their dimensions changed to fit within an area of a multi-radical character. The structures for double radicals are side by side or top over bottom. 3 components can be presented as left, middle, right, top, middle, bottom, or as combinations of double radicals. Some of the radicals may appear in any of these positions. A character may also have a symmetrical structure.
Whilst different parts of letters have certain names, the different parts of a radical are named by their strokes, indicating direction and shape. Some books emphasize that there are 8 basic strokes. Each of these strokes are said to be represented in the symbol Yong, which is the symbol for eternity. It is important to write using strokes in the correct direction, starting and finishing at the appropriate places. Economy of movement and repetitive practice is important for the speed of writing. Chinese characters may even be written in the cursive script, which is much more easily deciphered and understood if one has had practice writing it.
The method of writing depends on the instrument used. A matchbox pen can be made from some cardboard and a piece of doweling. European calligraphy is written with a square-shaped edge, and the edge was held at 45 degrees to the direction of character writing, because it proved faster and more characters could be written on the line. Left-handed people may use a different hand position for their hand movements during writing. Right-handers have an advantage because they do not need to worry about moving over wet ink. The direction of strokes in common handwriting are also formulated to be easier for the right-hander. The traditional method for writing Chinese characters is to prepare ink using an inkstone and water. The ink is then applied to the paper using a pointed brush. Genuine Chinese ink does no damage to a brush, provided that it is rinsed thoroughly. after use. Brushes that I used were made from bamboo and possibly some kind of animal hair. A new brush needs to be opened by rinsing in hot water and then nibbled along 2/3 of the length of the hair. White-coloured brushes, used by beginners, are normally made from goat's hair. They are easy to handle, but not particularly robust. Good writing brushes should have a fine tip and bend without splitting. The brush is held in the same way with the left hand or the right hand, perpendicular to the page, with the top of the brush held between thumb and forefinger, and the other fingers pressed lightly against the brush. The elbow of the writing hand is always raised from the writing surface, even with the smallest writing. A perfectly formed character should give the impression of balance within its square allocation. A way to test balance might be to apply the design of the character onto a balanced wheel, and determine if there was any movement about the wheel's axle. Methods for teaching this writing balance includes the use of a square with 9 internal squares, or 8 segments created by horizontal, vertical, and diagonal lines. Everyday handwriting of Chinese characters uses a ballpoint pen or pencils. Pencils are composed of graphite and a clay made from aluminium or silicon oxides. The hardness of the pencil depends on the percentage composition of the graphite. Soft rods are more fragile than hard rods. The hardness of a pencil can be determined by how much of an impression it makes on a piece of cardboard when an equal pressure is applied to different pencils. Ballpoint pens are made using a viscous ink of aniline dye that makes use of the small amount of water that is on the paper to wet the paper. There are also certain writing implements that are closer in construction to brushes. Chinese characters are now written from left to right rather than from top to bottom. Punctuation has been borrowed from our system of writing to indicate sentence structure. There are a number of difficulties that must be overcome whilst reading Chinese characters, in the same way that it is possible to confuse words like white, while, or horse, house. While reading, it is possible to confuse Chinese characters such as shi and tu. Context is used to prevent this confusion. Reading requires a series of eye movements called saccades that when recorded can give details into mental processes used. More successful readers make less of these eye movements. I created a device to record my eye movements while reading sentences using a piece of glass and a blackboard. The English language is not written to accurately represent its phonemes. English uses thousands of combinations of letters, graphemes, to make up its phonemes. The Chinese language uses characters to represent syllables, and a lot of these syllables are represented by multiple characters and may be considered homophones. The syllable shi, for instance, has a large number of associated characters with different meanings. Homophones in English are words such as through and to.
Chinese characters are a different way of recording information for posterity. Many characters have been used in their current form for a long time, so it is possible, with little extra study, to understand centuries-old writing. Writing characters is an art, and truly beautiful characters can be constructed, although perhaps the meanings and sounds that are associated with them is where their true beauty lies.